All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been creating a series of video presentations based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I'm in the advanced thing talking about forms, and we're recreating, or I don't know what the right word is, but well, not even optimizing. We're adding to the select control. And we did all the HTML and CSS, or at least all so far, and now it's time to bring the control to life with JavaScript. It says the following is educational code, not production code, and would not be used as is. So they're making no guarantees that, for instance, it'll 100% work in all cases. All right. Before starting, it's important to remember JavaScript in the browser is an unreliable technology. You can turn off JavaScript as a user. All right, it says this is unusual. Very few people do it, and probably very few people even know how to do it, but it can be done. It's possible your script did not load correctly. You maybe gave it a wrong path or something else. The script is buggy. Stuff happens. The script is in conflict with a third-party script, so something else that you're already using. It could be port designation. It could be a lot of different things. The script is in conflict with or is affected by some kind of a browser extension. The user is using a legacy browser, and one of the features you require is not supported on it. The user is interacting with the content before the JavaScript has been fully downloaded, parsed, and executed. And as they mention here, because of these risks, it's very important to consider what will happen if your JavaScript doesn't work. All right. As it says, just remember it is vital to make your script generic and reusable. In this example, if the JavaScript code isn't running, we'll fall back to the standard select element, which is probably what you'd want to do anyway. We include our control in the select, which one is displayed depending on the class of the body element. All right. To achieve this, we need two things. First, we need to add regular select element before each instance of our custom control. There is a benefit to having this extra select, even if our JavaScript works as hoped. We will use this select to send data from our custom control along with the rest of the form data. All right, we will discuss this in greater depth later on. So, we've already put some code into our body to my knowledge. I thought we had done that before. You know, we've got some divs and some other stuff in there, so I don't know if they want it in here or not, but I'm just going to put it into the form as they've shown it here. All right, so there's the form. Second, we need two new classes to help us hide the unneeded element. We visually hide the real select if our script isn't running, or the custom control if it is running. By default, HTML code hides our custom control. All right, so this will go up, it looks like, at least into our CSS. And you can see how big this CSS file is becoming, or the CSS portion. It's over 100 lines. I mean, this is more than a good candidate. You know, it's about 130 lines or something like that. This is really a good candidate to be put into its own file, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm putting everything in here. In fact, I'm even planning on taking the JavaScript that I think we're going to be putting in just a minute and putting it down here. All right. Now we need a JavaScript switch to determine if the script is running or not. The switch is a couple of lines. If at page load time our script is running, we want to remove the noWidget class and add the widget class, thereby swapping the visibility. So notice the difference. Notice how that works by default. This one, I think we're still going to have to add some code to make it work. All right. If you really want to make your code generic and reusable, instead of doing a class switch, it's far better just to add the widget class to hide the select elements and to dynamically add the DOM tree represent. But that, again, it's fairly complex stuff. All right. In the code we are about to build, we will be using standard JavaScript and DOM APIs to do all the work we need. The plan is to use the following: the class list, add event listener for each, query selector, and query selector all. And we may or may not have talked about this already, but these two look very similar. But let's say that you use the query selector and you search for a paragraph. All right. Then what that does is it returns the first paragraph that it finds. Whereas the query selector all, I believe it returns a node list. It's kind of like an array of all the paragraphs on the page. All right. So beyond the availability of these specific features, there is still one issue remaining before starting. The object returned by query select all is a node list rather than an array. It's like kind of what we just said. This is important because array objects support for each, but node list does not. So we have to do some conversion by saying nodelist.prototype.forEach, where basically we are aliasing this so that in essence it's calling this. All right. If you need to support legacy browsers, you must ensure that the browsers support these features. If not, as it says, you can use a library or a polyfill. And basically what we're talking about there is you want to make sure that it doesn't break on legacy browsers. All right. So it might be something as simple as just not duplicating, but looking at the earlier code and just making sure that if it doesn't work on their browser, that we go back to the regular select statement. All right. The groundwork is done. Now we start to define all the functions that will be used each time the user interacts with the control. As always, they've done a fine job in here of putting in comments. And again, you can see this is now up to close to 300 lines. So you can see how big this kind of stuff can get and how quickly it can get big. And again, as mentioned, this is well commented in here. So as it says, this function will be used each time we want to deactivate a custom control. It takes one parameter, select, the DOM node with the select class to deactivate. Okay. If the control is not active, there's nothing to do. So just return. We need to get the list of options. That was the thing with the fruits that we saw before. We close the list of options. We deactivate the custom control itself. All right. As it says, this one is going to control everything that we do when we want to deactivate the control. It takes two parameters, select, again, that DOM node, and select list, the list of all the DOM nodes with the select class. If the control is already active, there's nothing to do, so again, we just return. We have to turn off the active state of all our controls because the deactivate function fulfills the requirements of the for each callback. We use it directly without using an intermediate anonymous function. And we turn on the active state for this specific control. Going over this in the depth and breadth of coverage that you need to totally understand it could potentially take a long time. I'm not talking minutes. I'm talking possibly hours. All right. So as it says, this function will be used each time the user wants to open or close the list of options. The list is kept from the control. We change the classes. You can just see it, all right? Again, this highlight, as it says, takes the two options, select, as we talked about before, and the option that you want to highlight. All right. You need these in order to handle the various states of the custom control, and that's what they just mentioned. Next, we need to bind these functions to the appropriate event. So in other words, we've got to make sure that when the appropriate event takes place, that the appropriate code is called. So you'll notice now we're up at 300 and some lines. All right. At this point, our control will change state according to our design if it doesn't get updated yet. So this is the example. Again, you see the greenish around there. Still not, looks at least, as far as I can tell at least, it's not changing. Let's take a look at what we have and make sure we didn't break anything. How's that? So the first thing I should do is make sure that we've saved. We have. So let's open up Forms, Advanced, Custom Select, Index. Looks like I've got both of them there, which isn't a good thing. All right. Don't think I missed anything, but of course it's always possible. All right, the next thing is handling the controls value. And then we've got making it accessible and an alternative approach using radio buttons and the conclusion. I think what I'll do is I'll go up to handling the controls value in this particular video. And then once we get done with this section, I'll stop and I'll finish it up with one more video. Now that our control is working, we have to add code to update its value according to user input and make it possible to send the value along with the form data. The easiest way to do this is to use a native control under the hood. Such a control will keep track of the value with all built-in controls provided by the browser, and the value will be sent as usual when the form is submitted. As seen previously, we already used a native control earlier. All right, so what are we doing? Trying to add the remaining code, and I don't know if it pays or doesn't pay to sit and read comments to you, but again, you'll notice now I'm up almost to 400 lines, and probably after I add the next snippet in here, we will be over 400 lines. All right, so with these two functions, we can again bind. So ideally, then we are going to be able to actually change the value that's in there. All right. And again, we are over 400 lines now. Hopefully, again, you're really seeing the value of going back and putting the JavaScript in its own file, the CSS in its own file, etc. So let's look at this and see if now I am able to change. Still isn't working, so I'm missing something, because in their example, it now works. All right. Says, wait a second, are we really done? So let's stop it right here and we'll talk about accessibility in the next video.